Imagine waking up to find a manipulated image of yourself, something you never consented to, circulating online. Not just a damaging photo, but an AI-generated deepfake so convincing that even your closest friends can't tell it's fake. It spreads like wildfire, reshared and reposted by strangers and bots. Where do you turn? Who will make it stop? And how fast can they help before this virtual nightmare becomes the defining image of your life? For countless victims of non-consensual intimate imagery, or NCII, this scenario isn't hypothetical at all. The digital era has given everyone a megaphone, but it's also made even our most private moments dangerously vulnerable. But in May 2025, the US government took its boldest step yet to address this crisis. President Trump signed the Take It Down Act, a sweeping federal law designed to fight the explosion of revenge porn and deepfake abuse that's terrorizing people across America. Its promise: force big tech to erase these images, real or fake, within 48 hours or face serious consequences. But as the countdown to enforcement begins, a storm is brewing. Are we finally seeing justice for victims, or risking a future where algorithms and fear-driven censorship silence us all? Let's break down what's at stake, how we got here, and why experts are warning that this campaign for online safety could spiral into the most controversial chapter in internet history. First, let's rewind. The internet's ability to connect us all has come with an ugly downside. Over the past decade, cases of NCII have surged, often termed revenge porn, though the pain it inflicts has nothing to do with revenge for many victims. It's about humiliation, psychological trauma, and the loss of control, sometimes leading to devastating real-world consequences. What's new, and terrifying, is the rise of deepfakes. With modern AI, anyone can generate hyper-realistic fake images or videos, often in minutes. No technical wizardry required. That means anyone, anywhere, can create and post synthetic intimate imagery that's indistinguishable from the real thing. At the same time, the explosion of user-generated content, from social networks to private messaging apps, has made it nearly impossible to contain these threats once they escape into the digital wild. Victims have found themselves trapped in slow, frustrating processes, begging platforms to intervene. For years, tech companies moved sluggishly, hamstrung by conflicting state laws and their own incentives to avoid liability. It was a broken system. Some states launched their own initiatives, like California and Texas, but their reach was limited. Meanwhile, organizations like StopNCI.org saw takedown requests rocket up by over 40% in just the first 3 months of 2025. The message was clear: America needed a national fix. But it wasn't just a domestic problem. The European Union had already stepped in, passing the Digital Services Act that forced platforms to quickly remove illegal content like NCII. The pressure was building on Washington to act. And when deepfakes began to infect political campaigns, remember the Brookings study documenting AI-generated disinformation? Regulators knew they couldn't ignore the digital wildfire any longer. This brings us to the Take It Down Act. In some ways, it's a landmark for privacy legislation in the United States. The basics are stark. Any platform that lets users post or share content must, by law, remove covered images within 48 hours of receiving a proper takedown request. That request has to be signed, include contact info, clear details about the image, and a sworn statement that consent wasn't given. The law sweeps in adults and minors alike, and explicitly covers synthetic content, yes, deepfakes, even if it's almost impossible to distinguish from reality. For companies, the message is blunt: act fast, or the Federal Trade Commission comes knocking. Penalties can include huge fines, lawsuits, and years of forced oversight. Enforcement isn't a hollow threat either. The Congressional Budget Office estimates the FTC will spend $10 million annually just on keeping platforms in check. The logic makes sense. For victims, every hour that passes is agony. For years, people shared horror stories of platforms dragging their feet or refusing to take responsibility, while their reputations and lives were burned by viral abuse. The act aims to flip the incentive structure, make platforms scared of failing victims, not just of over-policing speech. As Senator Ted Cruz declared, the Take It Down Act is an historic win for victims of revenge porn and deepfake image abuse. Predators who weaponize new technology to post this exploitative filth will now rightfully face criminal consequences, and big tech will no longer be allowed to turn a blind eye. But like any law that redraws the boundaries of the internet, the devil is in the details, and the shadows are growing long. Across Silicon Valley, legal offices went into overdrive. Tech giants like Google and Meta rushed to pledge $50 million each to build AI tools capable of flagging and scrubbing illicit content at scale. The sense of urgency mirrors the tidal wave of requests platforms expect once the law takes effect in May 2026. There's a reason for that anxiety. The Act's 48-hour window is strict, and the consequences for missing it are severe. But for critics, the real problem isn't what platforms might fail to do, it's how far they'll go to avoid trouble. Here's the core dilemma. The law incentivizes platforms to err on the side of caution. Miss a takedown and risk millions in fines, or delete first and ask questions later, even if it means silencing legitimate voices. Here's where things get tangled. Unlike the familiar DMCA copyright model, the Take It Down Act doesn't require a counter-notice process. There's no legal tool for a person whose content is wrongly removed to contest or appeal. There are no real penalties for people who submit false or malicious takedown requests. As Eric Goldman from Santa Clara University's School of Law put it, the Take It Down Act's failure to include a counter-notice provision is a significant oversight, as it leaves individuals with no recourse if their content is wrongly flagged and removed. This oversight isn't just academic. According to the Electronic Frontier Foundation, the 48-hour takedown window is deeply troubling, as it incentivizes platforms to censor content rather than carefully assess its legality, potentially chilling free expression. It's a fear echoed by civil liberties advocates nationwide. Kate Ruane of the ACLU adds, "While the goal of protecting individuals from NCII is laudable, the Act's broad scope and lack of due process safeguards could disproportionately impact marginalized communities and stifle online activism." Imagine a world where satire, political commentary, even legitimate news reporting could disappear from the internet, not because it violated any law, but because an algorithm or a rushed content moderator was terrified of missing a deadline. With the clock ticking, it's not hard to see how overcompliance morphs from a hypothetical risk into a daily reality. And it's not just legal experts raising red flags. Tech engineers tasked with building AI filters warn that with so little room for contextual review, automated systems will inevitably overreach. Algorithmic moderation can confuse art, journalism, or protest for illicit material because it was trained to favor speed over nuance. Jamil Jaffer from Columbia University's Knight First Amendment Institute summed it up. The Act's mandatory takedown requirements raise serious First Amendment concerns, as they could lead to the suppression of legitimate speech and create a chilling effect on online expression. Meanwhile, the very platforms now at the center of this storm are bracing for an AI arms race. Every advance in deepfake generation spawns a new generation of detection tools, and malicious actors aren't sitting still. The fear is that as deepfakes grow more realistic and harder to spot, the tools tasked with catching them will get more aggressive and less reliable, with inevitable mistakes swept up in the crossfire. And consider this, platforms with fewer resources, think small forums, startups, even community news outlets, face an existential threat. Unlike Google or Meta, they don't have the luxury of billion-dollar R&D budgets or legions of lawyers. For many, the cost of building, policing, and maintaining a compliant takedown system could be crippling, if not fatal. But for privacy activists, another risk looms: your security itself. The law doesn't carve out explicit exceptions for end-to-end encrypted services. As Cory Doctorow, an EFF special advisor, warns, the Take It Down Act pressures platforms to actively monitor speech, including speech that is presently encrypted. The law thus presents a huge threat to security and privacy online. The Electronic Frontier Foundation has already filed a legal brief challenging the Act's constitutionality, arguing that its lack of due process rights and forced moderation could fundamentally reshape digital rights in America. What if the courts agree? Could this law spark a Supreme Court battle that pits online safety against the First Amendment itself? All of these tensions are coming to a head. As the year-long timer ticks down, public opinion remains firmly in favor of action. 3/4 of Americans told Pew Research in April they support tough laws to fight deepfakes. But as platforms scramble to revamp their systems and legal teams, a sobering realization is setting in. There is no perfect fix. The future could see a new, relentless kind of censorship, a never-ending AI arms race, or even a constitutional reckoning that tests the very limits of what the internet can and cannot be allowed to do. So here's the conundrum. The Take It Down Act promises a solution to one of the internet's most traumatic harms, but at what price? And as the deadline draws closer, Are we heading for a safer digital future or the dawn of industrial-scale censorship hidden behind the promise of compassion? And perhaps the biggest unknown, when the first wrongful takedown sweeps up a journalist, dissident, or artist, what happens next? Will the system adapt, or will this law become an unstoppable force, reshaping free expression across the world? As the countdown to May 2026 begins, the digital landscape is bracing for shockwaves from the Take It Down Act. Platforms are scrambling to overhaul moderation systems. Legal teams are preparing for a wave of lawsuits. Survivors of non-consensual intimate imagery finally see hope. But for millions of creators, activists, and ordinary users, a haunting question looms. Has the internet just crossed a line it can never uncross? Let's peer into the plausible futures about to unfold. Imagine logging into your favorite art forum. Last night, a moderator received a takedown notice. By the time you finish your morning coffee, countless posts, some years old, some from notable artists, have vanished. No warning, no explanation, no way to appeal, just gone. All because an algorithm flagged possible non-consensual imagery. Or perhaps a single fraudulent report slipped through. This isn't just a hypothetical. Legal scholars from Stanford warn that the Act's tight 48-hour timetable and pressure to comply will push platforms to automate removals, triggering, in their words, algorithmic overreach. Think about the scale. Over 200 million new images are uploaded every hour on the world's biggest platforms. Without the luxury of reviewing each case, companies are pouring billions into AI filters that can't always tell a deepfake from a parody or a crime from a news story. Kate Ruane from the ACLU warns that marginalized communities and activists could see their voices erased under overly broad censorship policies. Her concern: the Act's broad scope and lack of due process safeguards could disproportionately impact marginalized communities and stifle online activism. What happens when these removals sweep up a viral news expose, a work of art, or even political satire? Legal experts predict that the next 2 years could feature some of the largest First Amendment court battles of our era. Jamil Jaffer of Columbia University's Knight Institute warns, the Act's mandatory takedown requirements raise serious First Amendment concerns, as they could suppress legitimate speech and create a chilling effect on online expression. Meanwhile, the world's best and worst AI developers are locked in an arms race. As detection tools improve, so do the tricks used by malicious actors. According to a Brookings study, deepfakes have already warped political campaigns and undermined public trust. Now, as tech giants like Google and Meta pledge over $100 million for AI detection, we might see a future where every upload is scrutinized by a sophisticated neural network. Yet, perfection is unattainable. The smarter the detectors, the more cunning the evaders. For smaller platforms, the cost of compliance could be catastrophic. The Congressional Budget Office predicts that FTC enforcement alone will cost $10 million a year. But the real price, engineering, legal reviews, and constant upgrades, will fall hardest on startups and independent sites. Some may shut down user uploads altogether, quietly abandoning the very communities they once tried to protect. And then there's the legal minefield. Unlike the DMCA, which allows a counter notice if your content is wrongly taken down, the Take It Down Act offers no such safety net. The Electronic Frontier Foundation is already challenging this omission, warning that users will have no recourse if their content is wrongly flagged and removed. Will the courts decide that due process is essential for online speech? Or will the chilling effect become the new normal? But it's not all digital darkness. For survivors of revenge porn, for victims of deepfake abuse, the new law finally brings enforcement muscle and national standards. No more patchwork laws, no more jurisdictional limbo. As Senator Ted Cruz said, the act is a historic win for victims of revenge porn and deepfake image abuse. Predators will now rightfully face criminal consequences. What does all of this mean for you? For everyone who creates, shares, or simply consumes content online, the rules of engagement are changing fast. If you're a creator, now is the time to audit your archives. Check your old uploads for anything that, even inadvertently, could be misconstrued. Understand the new reporting systems on your platforms of choice. Most will soon roll out portals for takedown requests. Learning how to navigate these could save your work or your reputation. If you're a platform admin, don't wait for the deadline. Start stress testing your moderation systems today. Look at how the EU's Digital Services Act played out. Platforms that failed to prepare faced not just massive fines, but public outrage and boycotts. Collaborate with AI safety researchers, invest in human review teams, and, most crucially, build transparent, user-friendly appeals processes, even if the law doesn't require them yet. For ordinary users, vigilance will be key. If you find your content removed, document everything: timestamps, emails, and copies of your original posts. While the law currently lacks an official counter-notice pathway, public pressure and future amendments could strengthen your rights. Join the public conversation. The Pew survey shows that while 75% of Americans support regulation, they also want due process and fairness. Your voice matters in shaping these next chapters. And here's a critical lesson for everyone. The digital world is entering an era where privacy, security, and freedom of expression are more intertwined and fragile than ever before. The very tools designed to protect us from abuse could be weaponized against dissent, creativity, or truth itself. Stay informed. Support organizations fighting for due process and balanced reform. Share your stories if you are affected. Lawmakers and tech companies are watching public perception closely in these formative months. So, returning to our burning question, could the Take It Down Act, in its push to protect the vulnerable, accidentally rewrite the DNA of the internet? The answer, as it stands, is yes. The potential for algorithmic censorship and endless court battles is very real. As the first legal challenges wind their way through federal courts, we may soon witness a digital tug-of-war that will determine whether the internet remains a chaotic, creative forum or becomes a tightly controlled walled garden. Yet amidst the anxiety lies opportunity. If lawmakers listen to the constructive criticism from the EFF, the ACLU, frontline survivors, and regular users, there is a path forward. One that preserves both dignity and dialogue. One that punishes predators, not protesters. The act is not a finished product. It is the beginning of a debate that every user, now more than ever, has a stake in shaping. And here's a secret that the headlines rarely mention. Some of the world's most promising AI detection tools are being built by open-source communities, not just tech giants. Projects like Deep Trust and SynthGuard, led by teams of volunteers, are racing to create transparent, accountable ways to identify and flag harmful imagery, potentially offering both safety and safeguards for free speech. In the coming year, don't be surprised if the decisive breakthroughs come from students, coders, and activists, not just billion-dollar companies. So, as the Take It Down Act reshapes digital life, your choices matter. Demand transparency. Learn your rights. Vote for reforms that respect both safety and freedom. Share this video with your friends and communities, because the digital future is being written right now, and you have a voice in the story. Thanks for staying with us on this deep dive. If you learned something new, hit like, subscribe, and share your perspective in the comments. How do you think platforms should balance privacy and expression? What side effects worry you most? And what solutions would you like to see? Stay tuned, stay sharp,